Well, welcome back, folks. The video you're going to see today is actually the first of two parts on lubricating the Ford 8N tractor. My original thinking is this was going to be one continuous video, and I shot it that way, but once I got into the editing, I thought it was a little bit too long, so I'm breaking it into two pieces, or two sections. So this is the first of the two parts. Well, welcome back, folks. If you recall in a previous video, I had talked about one of the things I probably had to do was lubricate or grease the machine. So that's really going to be the topic of this video today, as that is lubrication, specifically greasing. And when I talk about greasing and lubrication, I'm really talking mostly about using grease guns and Zerk fittings. Right here you can see a very typical Zerk type fitting. There's 9 of them on this tractor that, at least as far as I can find, and according to the owner's manual, so I've already gone through and greased all of them. One of the things I was a little surprised by, I was anticipating more trouble getting grease through the current fittings on the machine. I was thinking some of them are going to be plugged. That's often the case when you've got an older piece of equipment like this, and not knowing how long it's been since it's been greased. I thought there's a good chance that at least 2 or 3, maybe even half of them wouldn't accept grease. Happy to report that that actually wasn't the case. I only had one fitting that wouldn't accept grease, and that was the clutch pedal pivot, and I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. All the rest of them, I had no problem getting grease through them and into the fitting. So I'll identify each of the fittings right now for you, so just stay with me as we do a little roundabout of the tractor. Remember, I said there was a total of 9. So 1, 2, 3. I have an oil cup right here on the rear bearing of the generator. I did lubricate that with some light oil. 4, 5, 6, 7. This is a clutch pivot. This is the one I had trouble getting the grease through initially, and I'll come back and talk about that in more detail in a minute also. 8 and 9. So let's go over the bench for a few minutes and we'll talk about the grease I typically use, my grease guns, and my thinking regarding greasing of this kind of equipment. This is a shot of my 2 grease guns. I've had both of these for years. They both have served me very well. This one on the left probably goes back to the late 70s or early 80s actually. This gun on the right is a pneumatic or air-powered grease gun. I use this usually when I have a lot of fittings to grease, such as my other tractor, my real working tractor. I almost always use this one because it has a lot of fittings between the front end loader, the mower deck, the various linkages on the tractor, and even though it's a relatively modern tractor, it does have a lot of fittings on it. So this is the one I use there. If I just got a few fittings to do, such as on this 8N, I would use, or do use, this grease gun. And again, it's worked really well. Both of them are cartridge style tools. That is, you slide a cartridge of grease into the cylinder of the chamber, and off you go. This is my grease of choice that I use in my grease guns. Lucas Red and Tacky. This happens to be, of course, one of the cartridges that I would use in the smaller of the 2 grease guns. Used it for many years. It's a general purpose grease, and though there are specific greases for specific purposes, this general purpose grease has always worked out really well for me, especially in applications like the 8N and the grease fittings and the usage of this tractor. So highly recommend it. I use other greases for other specific purposes, but for general purpose grease it's really tough to beat the Lucas Red and Tacky. Let's talk about Zerk fittings, or problem Zerk fittings. That is, fittings you can't get grease through, and that's usually caused by old grease that's congealed and hardened in the body of the fitting, and you just can't get grease through it. That's usually the cause, and once in a while you will run into the fitting itself, or the component you're trying to grease, for whatever reason, won't take the grease. But this case, it was the fitting. And I know you can get little tools that you put over the fitting and you strike it with a hammer, and they're supposed to use hydraulic pressure to open them up. I've never done that. I don't even own one of the tools. What I usually do, if at all possible, I just remove the fitting, take it over to my bench vise, use a little gentle heat, it will liquefy and soften the old grease. You'll actually literally run right out, clean it up with a little brake cleaner, put the grease gun over the nipple, pump a little grease through it and flush it out, put it back into the application, and almost always you're back in business. And in fact, that's exactly what I did with the clutch pivot lever. Took the old fitting out, heated it up on the bench vise, cleaned it up, put it back in, and the fitting then, or the pivot, would take grease. Now we're going to go over and talk about something different. We're going to switch over to discussion of the steering box. When we're discussing lubrication, there's one other major component we need to talk about, and we haven't really discussed it yet, and that's the steering box, and that's what this is right here. These are the steering arms that drop down to the drag links. When I got this tractor, this whole area in here, this is the shift lever right here, but this whole area in here was all oily and filthy dirty. In fact, I've cleaned that several times now, believe it or not. But what I think has happened is this steering box is supposed to have a 90 weight gear oil, and I think the seal at the bottom has failed, and the oil has drained out or leaked out over 75 years. That's where all this oil came from, right here, and has essentially drained the steering box of its lubricating oil. And there are three different boxes that were used, steering boxes that were used on this 8N series. This is the middle version, or the second of the three. And it took me a little while to figure that out, but I did. And it's filled on, or supposed to be filled on, the opposite side of the tractor. So let's go around to the left side, and I will show you the fill hole. Pointing to the fill hole, well, what's supposed to be the fill hole and oil level check hole right here for the steering box, which is of course to the right. The problem is you can't get at it, and this metal framing right here is part of the dash assembly, and there's no way to get at that. And everything I've read so far tells me that Ford abandoned this point of filling right after this particular machine or serial number was made, and went to an alternative, which we'll talk about next. Subsequent to this tractor being made, Ford did, I believe, recognize the error of their ways, and that is that fill and check plug on the opposite side. There's really no practical way to get at that. So ultimately what they recommended is pulling this bolt right here out, and because that does go into the cavity of the steering box, and just using that as a fill and check plug hole. And that'll work fine. You can fill it, you can check it. The idea when I say check it is you fill the oil up to the point that it just starts to weep out of the hole, and then you put the bolt back in, kind of like an outboard motor loader unit. The only issue on these older tractors, and again mine does have this issue, is the seals, I believe, are gone, and all the oil runs out. So they have come up, very smart people, this isn't my idea, but other very smart people have come up with a solution. So instead of using a relatively thin oil like a 90 weight gear lube, and that's a relatively thin oil, use a type of grease. And you take that bolt, take it out, you drill it, and you put a grease zerk fitting in the end of it, and you pump that cavity full of grease, and we're going to talk about that next. This is the bolt on the right side of the steering column that we just talked about. I removed it. It's a 7/16, I think it's 14 threads per inch, standard 1 inch long bolt. It's a heavy duty bolt, and what I mean by that is the head size is 11/16, which is not the standard anymore for a 7/16 14 bolt. Now it's 5/8. But nonetheless, the solution I found online, and again, I didn't devise this solution, some other very smart people did, but to take this bolt and drill a hole through it, right through the middle, all the way through, and then add a zerk, something like that, and then you can pump grease into the internals of the steering box. The lubricant or grease they recommend using for this purpose is this cornhead grease. This happens to be John Deere brand, though other manufacturers make this as well. It's a grade 0 grease right there. It's heavier than oil, but it's lighter than your typical grease. And it's considered special purpose because it's designed specifically not to leak past seals. And if you read the text here on the back, I don't know if you can see that or not, special purpose cornhead grease is specially formulated not to leak from the cornhead gear case or drain from the gears during idle periods. The thinking is that when you pump that cavity full of this grease, again, it's thick enough to lubricate well and not run out of past the seals, but not so thick that it won't keep the gear sectors and mechanism greased inside. I did pick up 2 tubes of this right here. That's what they say you'll probably have to, how much you'll have to put in there when you fit your grease fitting. So that's why I picked up 2 tubes. So my plan is to replace the original bolt. I don't want to damage or use this one with this one that I found in my inventory. It's the same size. It's 7/16, 14 threads per inch. I'll have to cut it off. It's too long. This bolt was 1 inch. This is, I don't know, 1.5 inches, I believe. But I'll cut it off. Then I'll use this to drill to accept the Zerk fitting. Probably won't leave this bolt in all the time. I'll use it only to grease the steering box. I'll take it out, put this one in when I'm normally just using the tractor. If I need to add grease, I'll just swap them back, put this one in to grease it, put this one back because it's original. So I need to drill this one all the way, cut it off, drill it all the way through, and then drill and tap for a 1/4 28. That's what the thread is on this this fitting is 1/4 by 28. And I have the taps. I already had the taps and the drill bits. I have 2 different kinds of taps. I have a taper tap right here. These are very good quality. I've used them before, but they're very good quality American-made taps. Taper tap, bottoming tap. And I'll probably start the threads with this one, finish it with this one. I will not drill 1/4 inch or a clearance drill. This is number 3 clearance drill. I won't drill all the way through the bolt. I don't need to that size. That'd be unnecessary because the hole in the Zerk is quite a bit smaller than that. So I really don't need to go any larger than that for the through hole in the bolt. But I do have to obviously drill a clearance hole. Again, this is, I think, a number 3 for the taps. Now, there are a couple of ways to drill the hole through the center of the bolt. You could try to do it by hand holding it in a bench vise and a hand drill. That would be a challenge to keep it straight, going straight. You have to have a very steady hand and a very good eye for that. A little risky, but probably would work. You could put it in a drill press, which I have. Chuck it up in a drill press and drill vertically. I could do it with my mini mill, very similar to the drill press, or use the lathe. So I'm going to use a lathe because it's more precise, easier to set up, and I can virtually guarantee I'm going to be perfectly in the center of this bolt when I do that. And in order to chuck it up in the lathe, I'm just going to use this little piece of aluminum as a sleeve, something like that. And I'll clamp that in the jaws, the 3-jaw chuck. And then I will come in and drill like this. And I will probably tap on the lathe as well. So we're going to have to go over the lathe right now and get this set up, and we'll go through the process of drilling this. First I have to cut it off, of course, to 1 inch. I'll just cut that on my bandsaw, bevel the edges a bit, make sure the threads are clean. I won't show that, and then we'll pick it up over at the lathe.